Χαίρομαι πάρα πολύ που σιγά σιγά βλέπω να προσέρχονται και οι φοιτητές μας. Τώρα ξεκινάμε μεταφερόμενοι στην Αμερική. Για να δούμε λοιπόν αν έχουμε μαζί μας τον Louis Jacobson. Louis, hello, good morning.
Hi, can you hear me?
Athens.
Can you hear me?
Yes, the sound
Okay,
is
good.
perfect. So
Good.
it's our great privilege to connect with you. Thank you very much for being with us. So Louis Jacobson is Chief Correspondent for PolitiFact. I think PolitiFact needs no introduction because it is one of the most influential fact-checking organizations in the world. So Louis has an extensive background on journalism, and he's absolutely on the front lines of the battle against disinformation. So, Louis, I think that fact-checking is not only about correcting technical errors. Am I right? So,
Yes.
Thank you for being with us. Fact-checking, I think it's an urgent, daily democratic necessity. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for letting me talk about fact-checking, and a big thank you for Achilles Karadimitriou, hope I said that right, of Politikometro, who I met during a previous visit to a fact-checking conference in Greece. So I'm glad we've kept in touch. I'm pleased to be part of a mission to hold powerful politicians to account and to cut through the clutter to provide people with a better understanding of news from across the globe, news that frequently seems overwhelming. When I was hired for my current job in 2009, PolitiFact had been around for 2 years. FactCheck.org had been there for a few years more than that, but we were small. I was employee number 4, and a lot of people had never heard of fact-checking before. In fact, really before I took the job, I had never heard of it either. From the start, much of the news coverage of politics, at least in the US, let politicians make claims without the reporter stepping in and researching which perspective or view was better supported by the facts. The goal of our website when we launched in 2007 was to scrutinize all sides of an issue, to use the most unbiased sources possible, and to render a decision about what was true or not. When I was hired, we were focusing on fact-checking politicians, as well as chain emails, which some of you may remember were the precursor to social media, a concept that didn't really exist in a big way in 2009. Fact-checking got its turbo boost, both in terms of public attention and in terms of investment and personnel, after 2016, due to rising concern about social media having played a role in sharing false information in the 2016 presidential election. Soon after that, we started working with Facebook and later with other social media companies to fact-check claims by people who were using those platforms. Facebook and other social media companies expanded their push with similar efforts all across the world, bringing fact-checking to a broad swath of the globe. These efforts were not perfect. Even the fastest fact-checking cannot match the speed of falsehoods that spread virally on social media platforms, but I do think that they were useful. For us, our staff size roughly quadrupled with this cash influx, and the amount of published fact checks also increased by a very large amount. And this also led to lots of urgent fact checking during the coronavirus pandemic a few years later. Our work with Facebook kept going for the next 8 years. Then, at least for the US Facebook project, they pulled their funding in 2025. I know that was not necessarily the case for the rest of the world, but for us, it was a huge hit to our finances. Fortunately, we have managed to adapt with only fairly modest cutbacks, and the directions we're going really point to the way that fact-checking seems to be headed today. First, we are still fact-checking politicians, as we always have, and has been a core a core focus of our work. Although, interestingly, we don't have all that many more people on staff focusing on the political fact-checking as we did just a few years ago. Back, when I joined 17 years ago, we had about 3 or 4 journalists focusing exclusively on this sort of political fact-checking, and now we have about 4 or 5. It's really not that much more. And this is despite the increased urgency of political and policy fact-checking today. A good example of the work that we do came on February 28th, when the world learned that the U.S. and Israel had launched wide-ranging attacks on the Iranian military and leadership targets. Tensions between the U.S. and Iran have been building for weeks, and prior to that, for decades. But the specific timing and the broad sweep of the military campaign caught lots of people off guard. At such a tense moment, fact-checking was crucial. We jumped in, and so did other fact-checking outlets around the world, including Agence France-Presse in France, Germany's Deutsche Welle, Iran's Fakhnama, and Boom in India. On the war's first day, we looked at whether President Donald Trump was right when he said that Iran could, quote, soon, unquote, have missiles capable of reaching the U.S. In saying that, we found Trump contradicted a 2025 federal government assessment that said such capabilities were years away. In short order, we looked at what the war might mean for petroleum markets, and that was nothing good, and whether the U.S. had a virtually unlimited supply of munitions to fight the war. The answer is it varies by type. We delved into misleading social media posts about the war, and we offered readers advice on how not to get fooled by war fabrications online. Trump also asserted multiple times in mid-March that the U.S. and Israeli strikes had already, quote, destroyed 100% of Iran's military capability. We concluded that although data showed that the U.S. had weakened the military capabilities of Iran, it was still continuing to fire missiles and drones at its neighbors and at U.S. military sites. Determining the truth of something happening under classified conditions on the other side of the world is tricky, and fact-checkers' assessments are, always require caveats about what we do and do not know. But we and other fact-checking outlets know how to use the resources that do exist, including data and the assessments of experts we found to be trustworthy. We value transparency. We only use sources who we can quote by name. And we value fairness, including reaching out to whoever is making the claim to see what their evidence is. The second type of work that we're focusing on these days, and we value fairness, is something that some of the staffers who worked on the Facebook project have transitioned into, and that's covering claims about health and wellness. We had already started to look at this topic during the COVID-19 pandemic as questionable claims swirl around the internet. But the longer-term rise of vaccine skepticism and other types of skepticism about traditional medical consensus has kept us busy, especially since the start of Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s tenure in charge of U.S. health. Today, we are in the process of launching a vertical called Well Informed that takes a PolitiFact-style approach to testing claims about health and wellness. It's not formally launched yet, but we already have 2 staffers working full-time on stories of this sort, and we're publishing them on our main site. In fact, yesterday I just did my first story for that site, Well Informed. I wrote about the hantavirus case in the cruise ship off the coast of Africa. My colleagues are writing about such topics as what are the health benefits of diet sodas? What are microplastics and what are the risks? What about ultra-processed food? What are the risks and benefits of health supplements like turmeric? Can you really detox your body? And how important is vitamin K for babies? We expect that our coverage of these topics will draw in a different type of reader, people who may not necessarily be dialed into politics, and that will be good for expanding the reach of fact-checking, we think. The third area we're trying to pay close attention to is the impact of AI. So far this year, we have written more than 24 fact checks on things created using AI, and we've also done reader guides and trend stories on the topic. One of our staffers is taking the lead on covering this topic. I recall in the 2024 presidential campaign, I was often asked whether AI was something that had really become a big concern. At the time, I felt like it really hadn't yet. Now, though, less than 2 years later, I think the tools have become more persuasively real. And I think both I and a lot of our readers are, having difficulty telling apart what is real on the internet and from what is not. I think fact checkers have to be at the forefront of this topic. And I will say, just as an aside, we do use a little bit of AI in our work in a very limited way. We use Otter, which is a real-time transcription program to help us keep track of things like presidential speeches and press conferences, so that we can read and not have to watch the whole thing, and then we can find the original quote if we need to. We also, a staffer on our staff at Pointer, which is our parent company, has become a real expert in terms of creating AI, and he actually created a sort of internal use rating tool where we paste in the draft of a story, and and the tool looks at our old coverage and suggests what it thinks the rating should be based on our past ratings. And it's actually pretty good. It's not perfect, but it's another data point that we use as we figure out how to rate things on our 6-point rating scale. Finally, fourth, we have put a lot of time and effort into getting our work out there in the public. One way is by social media. The number of people who see our work is probably much higher for social media followers through things like videos than it is for people who read our articles. We are putting a lot of work into daily and weekly newsletters so we can form a stronger relationship with our readers, who may then turn into small-scale financial donors. We have also been entering a growing number of partnerships with TV stations, radio stations, and newspapers to share our stories to the wider public. I personally do 1 or 2 segments every week for a local TV station, something I didn't do until 2023. This is just repackaging what I've already written, but that's fine. It's always been our philosophy that we want to meet readers where they are. If that means that they're watching a local news show or scrolling through TikTok to find one of our videos, that's great. If they want to delve further into any of my stories, they can always find them at the website. Just to close, we live in dangerous times, dealing with things like wars and crude oil shortages. If we hear or see a claim that makes us say, I wonder if that's true, then that's probably something lots of readers will wonder too, and we want to be there to help. And that is what keeps us motivated to go into work every day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Luis, for this insightful keynote speech. I think you raised many topics regarding technology, but as well as regarding how politicians express themselves in the current era. First of all, I would like to give the floor to the audience. If any of you would like to raise any question to Luis. Okay, Luis, one question on my part, because you made references to politicians and how they express themselves in the public sphere. So many times, politicians express emotional truths, let's say, okay, because we are going through the era of politainment, the combination of politics and entertainment. So how can a fact checker decode or dismantle these synthetic realities or emotionally charged realities on the part of, or arguments, emotionally charged arguments on the part of politicians? You mentioned great examples from your background. Thank you.
One thing I've learned from having been involved in fact checking now for so long is that the truth is not always simple or straightforward. As you may know, we have a a 6-point rating scale called the Truthometer, which goes from true to mostly true, half true, mostly false, false, and pants on fire. And this has been the same since day one, since we were created, the same format. And our belief was that truth is not necessarily easy to determine, and that there are various gradations of truth. So something can be partially true. It can be misleading, but not totally untrue. And what we do, after our reporting is done, and the writing of the article is done, and then it's edited, our system is that we get together the first editor, as well as 2 additional editors who haven't read the story yet. And the 3 of them, plus the writer, get into what we call a chamber, where we basically discuss the issues raised by the article, and determine what the rating should be. And these, can range from very quick 2 or 3 minute gatherings, if it's fairly clear cut, or 30 or 45 minutes, depending on how complicated it is. And what we look at are both the, literal words that they're saying and the literal numbers maybe that they're citing. And that carries weight, but also if something is close but not exactly perfect, it doesn't mean that it's wrong. If something is close, it can get a rating somewhere in the middle. And we like that flexibility. We give credit for the point that the speaker was trying to make, but we don't give it full credit unless they do have the facts to back it up. So we, firmly believe that there is a range of accuracy, and we try to reflect that in our rating system because it has the 6 points going from true to pants on fire.
Okay, thank you so much. Any questions from the audience? Από πού έχουμε ερώτηση? Okay. Παρακαλώ ένα μικρόφωνο στον κύριο. Ναι. Okay. Okay. So, Luis, the question from the audience goes as follows. If you mentioned the classification of PolitiFact, so if you have made any changes in this classification due to the phenomenon Donald Trump?
Well, first, let me say that we did make one change in our classification system. It's kind of a funny story. This is probably 15 years ago. Our rating that we call mostly false now, it used to be called barely true. So that was between half true, and then it went to barely true, and then it went to false. Then a candidate in a state race was citing one of our fact checks that gave him a barely true. And he said, "This claim is true." And so we didn't want to get to give politicians a chance to say that something that got a barely true, which is basically misleading, to basically say that it was true. So we took out the word true from that rating, and we changed it to a mostly false rating. So it's been very, very consistent over the years, and we've never really faced any pressure to change it or any sort of legitimate criticisms. It's just sort of accepted. I would say that Donald Trump has had kind of an interesting impact on what we do in a number of ways. So what is most notable for us is that President Trump, and even before he became president or between his 2 terms, when he was a private citizen, he talks a lot. He says a lot. And it's often stream of consciousness and He'll sometimes go back and forth in one sentence or two with completely differing sentiments that sort of contradict each other. It's sometimes hard to parse his language. So just doing the simple fact checking is challenging with him. It's also hard sorry, and I should also say that is very different from most of the past U.S. politicians. I think the clearest contrast was in the time of President Obama. He would have all of his statements, vetted by his staff before he said anything. He was very cautious. He didn't get too far over his skis, as they say. It doesn't mean that he was always right, but it does mean that he usually had some sort of evidence to back it up, and usually our fact checks were about the parts that he was leaving out. He was telling part of the story but not the whole story. With Trump, you sometimes don't know where his claims come from, and although his press office is quite helpful getting back to us, they don't always have the information, like a specific footnote almost for the things that he says. So there's that. The other thing is that he is so all-encompassing in terms of his comments that we have to be careful not to focus too much on him. We don't want to let everybody else in the political universe in the U.S. Slide and avoid getting fact-checked. So we have to go out of our way to make sure that both other Republicans in his party, but also Democrats and other people outside elected politics who are involved in some way in politics, get some scrutiny as well. During the time when the first 2 years after Biden was in office and Trump didn't start to run again for his second term, we really tried not to fact check him very much, because we wanted to sort of turn the page and not have him and what he said dominate what we're doing. Obviously, when he started to run for president again, two years into the Biden term, we had to fully start fact-checking him because it became clear he was going to become the nominee. We have fact-checked him over 1,000 times. We actually did a special article for his 1,000th fact check that we did, which was in early 2024. So the number is much higher by now, obviously. It's probably 1,300 or so fact checks, I'm guessing. And that was far more than any other politician. I think Obama was second with about 600. But I chalk it up to the fact that he's been, on the national stage for a decade as a very high-profile figure, 2 terms as president, 3 times running for president. So he's definitely hard to ignore.
Thank you so much. Luis, please stay with us to get an idea of the Greek politicians. Thank you for your thought-provoking speech and answers.
Thank you for having me.